Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for the Binding Coil of Bahamut, Turn 2. This is the second section of this raid instance and is unlocked once you or your group's leader has completed Turn 1. My name is Ms. Tech and I'll be your dungeon guide. While there are 3 small nodes to kill before you gain access to the actual boss, Turn 2 does not have any traditional trash pulls. The entire turn needs to be looked at as one giant gauntlet. From the moment you pull the first node, the Enrage Timer for the entire turn will begin. Think back to the mini ADS from Turn 1. Here we get 12 clicks to get through Turn 2, giving us 12 minutes before we are nuked off the map. The group is given a choice of which route to take to the last boss, and what nodes we kill will ultimately impact the abilities that the boss will use. Everything is connected in this turn, and killing certain nodes will, in a sense, deactivate whatever special ability that node had from the main boss. The route that we normally take is as follows, and in this video I'll be discussing the way the encounter is affected when dealing with this route. Each node has the same abilities you should be familiar with by now. The most important one is again high voltage, which should be interrupted at all times. Also, melee needs to remember to run out of the repelling cannons. The one new thing tanks and healers have to deal with is a stacking debuff on the current tank. With each stack, the debuff increases the tank's vulnerability to damage, and after 5 or 6 stacks, the outgoing damage will be too much for the tank to survive through. As such, it's important to tank swap, and all tanks are expected to have Provoke by the time they enter Turn 2. The easiest way to do this is quite simple. The first tank will hold the boss until they reach about 4 stacks of the debuff, at which point the second tank will Provoke and hold threat until the first tank's debuff falls off. This is usually at around the time the second tank has about 3 or 4 stacks as well. From then on, each tank will provoke the boss once their debuff falls off. To ensure that proper threat is maintained, each tank alerts the other around 3 seconds before their provoke, at which point they should have the last and highest enmity generating level of their combo ready to go. Once they provoke, the old tank will sit on their hands for a few seconds to allow the new tank to gain a decent threat lead. To save time between each pull, whichever tank doesn't have a debuff at the time should pull the next one. The idea is you want to get through these baby bosses as fast as possible to give yourself as much time for the final ADS encounter. The second mini-boss has a chain lightning ability that will bounce between players in a close proximity. The damage from this is almost negligible, but killing it will ensure that the final boss will not have this chain lightning ability. The third mini-boss has an extra crazy fire AoE to dodge that blooms from the center of the node. It does a fair amount of damage and places a pretty spicy dot on you if you do get hit by it. Killing this node ensures we don't have to do this crazy dance on the final boss. Finally, we reach the final boss of the turn, Big Man ADS. Again, you'll be expected to interrupt high voltage, avoid piercing lasers and repelling cannons, and tank swap at the appropriate debuff stack. He will also hit the whole raid with Vacuum Wave. Healers be ready with those AoE heals. Now, on our way down here, we left 3 nodes active, giving us a pretty good idea of what abilities to expect from the boss. Every 25% that we chip away from the boss will open the door to a new ability. At 75%, you'll see the Quarantine node pop up, this being one of the nodes we did not kill on the way down, and it will send out to Allegan Rot. Anyone that has progressed through Heroic Putricide in WoW will have a slight advantage as they've already seen this mechanic in action. The idea behind Rot is simple. Rot will land on a random member of the raid, and after 15 seconds the player will explode, wiping the raid. To avoid this wipe, Rot needs to be transferred to someone new before the timer runs out. As such, the player with Rot should move to the next person in line to receive the Rot at around 7 to 5 seconds left on the debuff. Once the player is close enough to the other person, Rot will spread to the new person and the whole process will start again. The trick here is that the person that used to have Rot now has a 40-second debuff on them that makes them immune to Rot, not allowing them to receive it again until the end of their timer. It's a delicate balance of passing the Rot along to untainted players and then doing it again with the next Rot, all while destroying the boss. Now, I tried my best to show how this is handled while recording this, but obviously with the room being as small as it is and my point of view being completely obstructed by a massive angry laser ball thing, well, there wasn't much to see. So, time for a little demonstration. I've brought all of my friends along to give you a rough idea of how Rot is handled. Let's pretend that EOS marked by X is the ADS and I'm the first player to receive the Rot. Everyone is spread out so that we don't accidentally pass the Rot when moving out of the way of AoE attacks. Since the room is pretty small, we usually have our 2 healers standing in the middle of the room while the ranged damage dealers are hanging out at max ranged in the back. I continue on with the fight until my debuff reaches around 10 seconds left, at which point I move over to the next person in line. Be sure to call this out as well. There's no super obvious visual component to Rot, and people are pretty prone to tunnel vision. Give them a heads up that they're about to receive Rot and go back to your spot. Simple enough, right? The group will be numbered before we engage ADS to give us an idea of the order that we'll send off Rot in. As long as everyone keeps their head on, rot is a fairly simple mechanic to handle. At around 50%, ADS will get mad at you for being such good raiders and handling rot like pros that he'll start to throw out a new ability called Gravity Field from the attack node. This is the same angry purple void zone that you've seen already in turn 1. Be sure to avoid it at all times as it does do excess damage and will slow you, something you don't want when you're trying to pass rot. At 25%, the last ability will be activated by the sanitary node. This is an incredibly annoying AoE pattern with 3 layers that will hit anyone not standing in the tiny little safe zone. The 3 layers of this AoE are huge, so be careful when moving out of it, especially if you're handling rot at the time. But don't let these extra abilities phase you. Just keep taking each one at a time and you'll have him down easy. Congratulations on defeating turn 2. Now you get the pleasure of dealing with turn 3, which is easily, hands down, the hardest thing you will ever do in your life. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.